Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are diving deep into the world of occupational therapy theories, specifically tackling the occupational adaptation model, OA.
Right. And if you're maybe a novice OT student feeling a bit overwhelmed by all the frameworks, well, this should help.
Yeah, consider this your, knowledge shortcut for OA.
Exactly. Our mission today is really to walk you through the core components. We're drawing heavily from a presentation based on applied theories in occupational therapy by Cole and Tufano. That's the 2024 edition, Chapter 8.
Yeah.
And we should definitely acknowledge the presentation creator, Dr. Jack Ruelas. We're aiming to synthesize, every key concept in there so you can really grasp its clinical power.
Perfect. Yeah. And we kick off with a philosophy that, honestly, it changes everything. It's that foundational OA quote from Schade and Schultz back in '92.
Yes. Mastery is more than the ability to perform a discrete task. It is a reflection of the client's experience as an occupational being.
Just nails it, doesn't it?
It really does. That quote sets the stage perfectly. It tells us, as practitioners, we're not just fixing things, we're teaching isolated skills.
Right.
We're helping clients reconnect with their identity as a doer, as an occupational being. It moves way beyond just the task.
Okay, so that's the big picture mindset.
Yeah.
How do Schade and Schultz actually define OA as a frame of reference then?
Well, at its heart, OA is all about the internal adaptation process.
Internal, okay.
Yeah. It looks at how people respond to occupational challenges all through life. And it really emphasizes that, that crucial interaction between the person and their environment. It's dynamic, transactional.
So it's less about what they do and more about how they figure out how to do it when things get challenging.
Precisely. How they manage change, how they adapt.
Got it. Okay, let's dig into the three core concepts driving the model. First up is adaptation itself.
Right. Adaptation is like the main engine. It's fundamental for occupational functioning overall.
Yeah.
But the second concept, adaptiveness, is where things get interesting and maybe a bit tricky for students.
Okay.
Adaptiveness is the person's capacity, their inherent ability, to meet those occupational challenges with what the model calls relative mastery.
So adaptation is the process, but adaptiveness is the potential, the internal resource.
You got it. Adaptiveness is that resource pool they draw from. And the third concept is what we actually see, the behavioral responses.
The observable outcomes.
Exactly. And these fall on a spectrum, right? From really successful adaptive responses all the way to getting stuck in disadaptive ones.
And disadaptive just means, what? Unable to cope.
Yeah, basically. It means the client just can't generate a response that meets both their own needs and what the environment is demanding. It's a breakdown in that process.
Okay. This framework feels like it's built on some pretty solid beliefs. Let's look at those basic assumptions. Number one, occupations give us natural chances to adapt.
Makes sense, right? We learn and grow by doing things. That's the core of OT, really.
And that connects to the next one. That healthy role functioning shows you have the internal capacity to meet expectations.
If you're managing your roles well, it suggests your internal adaptive capacity is working.
So logically, dysfunction pops up when someone just can't adapt to those challenges.
Exactly. That's assumption 3.
And I guess assumption 4 explains why that might happen. That adaptive capacity can be hit hard by, impairments, disabilities, or just really stressful life changes.
Absolutely. The model acknowledges these are huge factors. They can really diminish that capacity.
Okay. But there's an optimistic thread too, right? Assumption 5. Successfully adapting leads to successful occupational performance.
Yeah, there's a direct link. If you can adapt, you can perform.
And the last one, number 6.
Oh.
This one feels really essential. Every person has an innate desire to master their environment.
It's powerful, isn't it? That drive for mastery, for competence, is assumed to be fundamental to being human.
It is. But let me play devil's advocate, like a student might. If everyone wants to master things, doesn't focusing on the person's adaptation process risk blaming them when they fail, instead of maybe looking more at environmental barriers?
That is such a critical point, and it's why the model is transactional. Yes, the desire is innate, but OA fully recognizes that the occupational environment is just as powerful. It can either support or totally block that drive.
Okay.
So a disadaptive state isn't seen as a lack of desire, not at all. It's a breakdown in the response mechanism, often because there's a mismatch between what the person can do right now and what the environment is asking.
The mismatch.
Right. And the therapist's job isn't to somehow give them desire, but to help bridge that gap, to
Yeah.
reduce that mismatch so their natural desire for mastery can actually lead to success.
Okay, that clarifies things hugely. So we have the core ideas, the assumptions. Let's look at the actual process in motion. This is the transactional part you mentioned. We've got the internal person elements
Their sensorimotor, cognitive, psychosocial system.
interacting with the external occupational environment.
Right. And when those two meet, when there's a demand, it creates what OA calls a press for mastery.
The press for mastery. That's basically the occupational challenge itself.
Exactly. That moment where the situation demands something that maybe stretches your current abilities. And facing that press then triggers an occupational response.
It sounds like a constant feedback loop.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dig into how that response gets generated,
Yeah.
the adaptive response mechanisms. This seems key to the quality of the outcome. First is adaptive energy. Comes in two types.
Yeah, primary and secondary. Primary energy is that conscious, focused, very deliberate effort. It's structured, but honestly, it's less efficient. Think about learning to drive stick shift for the first time.
Right, total concentration, kind of clunky.
Exactly. Secondary energy is the goal. It's more subconscious, flows easily, it's creative, much more efficient. That's like when driving becomes automatic.
Yeah.
Smooth, integrated.
And we see this play out really clearly in that case study literature, right? With Jack, the 11-year-old boy with writing problems.
Oh, absolutely. The Boudaloop and Beltran paper illustrates it perfectly. Jack had some significant sensory-motor issues affecting his handwriting, so just the physical act of forming letters demanded almost all his conscious primary energy. He had to focus intensely just on moving the pencil correctly.
Which left very little energy for anything else.
Precisely. It completely drained the resources he needed for the secondary energy tasks. The higher level cognitive stuff like thinking about the story, organizing ideas, grammar, spelling.
Wow, so if you're pouring all your energy into the mechanics, the actual content suffers massively.
Totally. It shows that, a sensor-motor challenge isn't just physical. It has huge downstream effects on cognitive performance and overall adaptation because it hijacks that primary energy system.
That's a massive clinical insight. It changes how you'd approach intervention, doesn't it?
Fundamentally. Okay, so after energy, we have the adaptive response modes. How does the person actually try to respond?
Three ways. Existing, modified, new.
Right. The first instinct is usually an existing mode using strategies you already know what's familiar. If that doesn't work,
You tweak it slightly, that's modified.
you make small adjustments to your usual approach. But the real win, the goal of adaptation, is generating a new mode, developing a genuinely novel solution that works for this specific challenge.
Okay. Energy, modes, then the actual adaptive response behaviors. These are what we see. Hyperstabilized, hypermobile, blended. Can you give us quick analogies?
Sure. Think of hyperstabilized as being stuck in a rut. It's rigid, kind of primitive, like the person keeps trying the same thing over and over even though it's clearly failing. Resistance to change.
Like insisting on using a standard knife when you need a rocker knife because of arthritis, maybe?
Perfect example. Then hypermobile is almost the opposite. It's chaotic, random. The person tries a million different things rapidly, but with no real plan or logic. Lots of activity, but it's not directed. Flailing, basically.
Okay.
And the ideal, what we're aiming for, is blended behavior. That's mature, logical, flexible, but goal-directed. It shows true adaptation is happening. So zooming back in on the person themselves, OA looks at the person elements through three internal systems that all work together.
Right, the sensor-motor system, physical skills, sensory processing,
The cognitive system, thinking, planning, memory, problem solving.
and the psychosocial system, emotion, self-perception, social interaction.
Exactly. And it's crucial to remember these aren't fixed. They're constantly being shaped by our genetics, our environment, all our life experiences, always interacting, always adapting.
Okay, so that's the person component. How does a therapist actually use all this in practice? There's a clinical reasoning process, right?
Yes, OA provides a pretty systematic way to think through it. Step one is solid data gathering and evaluation.
What does that involve?
It means really understanding the client's meaningful occupational roles and the environments where they happen. Then you evaluate those three internal person systems, sensorimotor, cognitive, psychosocial. And critically, you identify those specific occupational challenges. The press for mastery,
Finding the mismatch.
finding the mismatch. Then step two is planning and intervention. And this has sort of three layers. First, you focus on occupational readiness, preparing the client, maybe addressing underlying issues. Okay.
Second, you target the meaningful occupational activity itself, the doing. And third, you actively work to promote those more effective adaptive responses we talked about, moving towards new modes and blended behavior.
Got it. Readiness, activity response, and the final step.
Step 3 closes the loop, evaluation of process and outcomes. Here, you're assessing things like, has their adaptive energy use shifted? Are they using more efficient secondary energy? Are their response modes changing?
And crucially, evaluating their sense of relative mastery, right? That seems like the big outcome.
Absolutely, and determining if the intervention is actually working based on that.
Okay, let's zero in on relative mastery then. It comes out of the adaptive response evaluation sub-process. How does that work?
So after the person makes an occupational response, they evaluate it, and they judge it against two things. Their own internal expectations, like their personal standards for how they should have done, and external expectations, societal norms, or what others might expect in that situation.
So it's both personal and social judgment. Exactly. And the outcome of that whole evaluation process is their perceived relative mastery.
And that has three specific parts.
Yes. Efficiency, how well did they use their time, energy, resources? Effectiveness, did they actually achieve the goal of the occupational challenge? And satisfaction, how satisfied are they personally, and how satisfied might relevant others be, like family or society?
Efficiency, effectiveness, satisfaction. That's a really comprehensive way to measure success from the client's perspective.
It is. It's the ultimate client-centered outcome in OA.
And thinking back to Jack, his case really showed low relative mastery, didn't it?
Painfully so, because writing took so much effort. Low efficiency, and the result wasn't meeting grade-level expectations, low effectiveness. He rated his mastery really poorly. I think the numbers were like 4 for efficiency, 3 for effectiveness, 4 for satisfaction on a scale where lower is worse.
Yeah, that clearly shows that disadaptive state the therapist needed to address, that gap between expectation and reality.
Precisely. That low self-rating is the evidence of the problem from an OA perspective.
Okay, so after the response happens and gets evaluated for relative mastery, there's one more step. The adaptive integration sub-process. What's that about?
This is basically the learning and reflection piece. The client takes that whole experience, the challenge, the response they tried, the effort it took, the outcome, how satisfied they felt, and they integrate it into their understanding of themselves and the world.
So they learn from it.
Yeah, they reflect, consciously or subconsciously, on what worked, what didn't. They might modify their internal strategies or their view of their own capabilities based on that feedback loop. And doing that strengthens their overall adaptive capacity for future challenges. It's how we grow and learn through occupation.
Okay, so boiling it down, what are the core intervention principles for an OT using OA?
Number one, it has to be a client-centered approach. You focus on occupations the client identifies as meaningful and challenging. No top-down goals.
Makes sense.
Number two, the therapist's role is to facilitate adaptive responses. You're not fixing the person, you're creating opportunities for them to develop their own solutions. The client is the agent of change.
Right, therapist is facilitator.
Right. And number three, you consistently aim to promote relative mastery. Support them in achieving that personal sense of competence, satisfaction, efficiency, and effectiveness we just talked about.
Client-centered, facilitate adaptation, promote mastery. Got it. Let's revisit the literature now with those principles in mind, starting again with Buchaloop and Beltran's work on Jack. The intervention was short, right? 5 weeks.
Yeah, focus specifically on his school role, particularly writing. And the way the therapist did it was just brilliant OA in action.
Oh, so?
Well, instead of just drills, the therapist tapped into Jack's huge passion, Star Trek.
Using his interests.
Totally. The therapist basically said, teach me about Klingons, which of course required Jack to write about them. It made the occupational activity purposeful, intrinsically motivating, and client-directed. That's how you facilitate adaptation.
Clever. And didn't they also use a shoe tying example to show the shift in response modes?
Yes. Initially, when faced with tying his shoes, Jack's response was, existing, he just slid his sneakers off without untying them. Avoidance, basically.
Yep.
But the therapist worked on related fine motor and cognitive skills through another activity, maybe threading beads or something similar. By connecting that skill and observing, Jack was eventually able to generate a new response mode for shoe tying. He figured out how to apply existing, not tying knowledge to the specific challenge of laces.
So he didn't just learn road steps, he adapted his existing knowledge.
Exactly, that's the difference. And the outcome, even after just 5 to 8 weeks, was significant. Jack actually started writing stories on his own initiative. That shows real change in adaptive capacity.
Wow. Okay, moving to more recent stuff. Green and colleagues in 2021 developed something called the OAPG.
Right, the Occupational Adaptation Practice Guide. They created and tested this guide to help therapists implement OA systematically, specifically in adult inpatient rehab.
And how did it go?
Really well, actually. They found it had high usability and reliability. Therapists found it helpful. It showed that OA can be practically applied to facilitate client-centered care and collaborative goal setting, even in busy settings like rehab units.
So proof of concept for structured application, and then there's a study by Mota Harinas-Hod and others from 2023 looking at caregivers for people with MS.
Yeah, the AOC CMS program adapting to occupational challenges of caregivers of MS, this was different. It was an OA-based group intervention.
For caregivers, interesting.
Very. It focused on helping them manage the ongoing, often stressful occupational challenges involved in caregiving. Things like managing their own roles, energy conservation, dealing with environmental barriers, psychosocial stress.
And the results.
Positive. They found it was feasible, and the caregivers were satisfied 75% satisfaction and 100% rated the content quality highly. It really demonstrates OA's relevance beyond individual physical rehab, extending into supporting people dealing with chronic psychosocial and environmental adaptation challenges.
Okay, so it's versatile. But the last piece of literature we have, Walder et al. From 2021, offered a bit of a critical look, right? A concept analysis.
It did. On the one hand, it confirmed OA's incredible breadth. They found evidence of it being used across something like 53 different practice contexts, stroke, mental health, pediatrics, but also newer areas like supporting people experiencing forced migration or homelessness.
Wow, 53 contexts. That's huge.
It is. But the analysis also highlighted a key challenge. Despite being so widely applied, the authors argued OA lacks full maturity as a concept.
What does that mean exactly? Lack of maturity.
It means things like the core definition, the specific attributes, and the boundaries, like, is OA purely the internal process, or is it also the outcome? These things aren't consistently defined or understood across all the literature and practice.
So there's some fuzziness around the edges.
A bit, yeah. And that lack of conceptual clarity and standardization makes it harder to develop reliable measurement tools and conduct really rigorous, large-scale research on its effectiveness compared to other approaches. Limits its clinical utility in some ways.
Okay, so despite that need for refinement, let's bring it back to the clinic for the student listening. How does OA guide practice day to day?
Well, you use it to focus your assessment on understanding the client's adaptive capacity and the specific press for mastery they're facing. In intervention, you're constantly thinking about how to create opportunities for them to generate those adaptive responses, rather than just teaching skills.
Facilitating, not fixing.
Right. For goal setting, you collaborate with the client on challenges they find meaningful. And your key outcome measure, what you're always tracking, is their progress towards that feeling of relative mastery, efficiency, effectiveness, satisfaction.
Makes sense. It provides a clear lens. What about the future for OA? Where does the research need to go?
Based on that Walder analysis and other work, definitely continued concept refinement, really nailing down those definitions and boundaries.
Okay.
We absolutely need more standardized assessment tools. Further testing and validation of things like the relative mastery measurement scale are crucial.
Right. Better ways to measure it.
And we need more long-term outcome studies to see the lasting impact. Plus, exploring its application in those emerging practice areas is really important.
Lots of work still to do, but a powerful framework. So, wrapping up for the novice OT student listening, what are the absolute key takeaways?
Okay, 4 main things, I think. 1, OA's unique focus is on the internal adaptation process, how people respond to challenge.
Got it.
2, it strongly emphasizes client-centered, occupation-based practice. Meaningful doing is central. 3, it's incredibly versatile, applicable across different age and conditions and settings.
Yeah.
And 4, the ultimate goal is promoting relative mastery and satisfaction from the client's perspective.
Perfect summary.
And maybe we close this part with that final slide statement. Occupational adaptation provides a framework for understanding how people navigate life's challenges through occupation. It really captures the essence. #tag outro.
It does. Okay, so that brings us to our final thought for you, our listener, to kind of mull over. We heard from the research, particularly Walder et al., that OA needs some conceptual refinement, especially around standardized measurement.
Right, that lack of maturity issue.
Yeah. But then we also saw the case of Jack, the 11-year-old, where applying these OA principles led to really profound, meaningful change pretty quickly.
The power is clearly there.
So here's the question for you to think about in your own future practice. How might you adapt or maybe refine the way you measure that feeling of relative mastery, particularly with, say, a pediatric client? Someone like Jack, who might find it hard to articulate complex feelings about efficiency or satisfaction using adult terms.
Ooh, that's a good one. Connecting the theoretical need for better measures with the practical reality of working with kids.
Something to chew on.
Definitely worth thinking about.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into occupational adaptation. We hope this helped make it a bit clearer.
Yeah, hope it was useful for your studies.
If it was, please do like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out.
And hey, before we sign off, just a quick heads up. The OT lyricist has a brand new album out. It's called Interprofessional Collaboration.
Oh, nice. Got to check that out.
Yeah, definitely worth a listen.
Awesome. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.